The spaceship drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its metallic walls reflecting the distant stars as they blinked in the endless void. Inside, the soft hum of the ship's engines filled the air, a constant, reassuring sound that echoed through the darkened hallways. In a small, dimly lit room at the heart of the ship, a young woman stood by a bed carefully tending to an injured man. Her name was Ilara, and she had been on this mission for what felt like forever. Alone, save for this man she had found injured and unconscious on the ship's floor days ago. At first, she had thought him to be just another soldier, lost in the chaos of the mission. But as the days passed, she realized that he was far more than she had expected. He wasn't just any human. There was something strange about him, something she couldn't quite place. His skin was unusually pale, and his eyes, when they opened, gleamed with an otherworldly intensity. But for now, she only cared for his recovery. His wounds were deep, but she had managed to tend to them as best as she could. She had done this before, tending to those in need during the long journeys between planets. But today felt different. The ship had been quiet for hours. The hum of the engines had quieted, and the only sound in the room was the steady breathing of the man on the bed. Ilara had prepared everything she needed for this moment: a bowl of water, cloths, and ointments. She had grown used to this routine, but today, as she prepared to clean his wounds, a feeling of unease settled over her. She hesitated, the bowl of water in her hands trembling slightly. Her heart began to race, and she couldn't quite figure out why. Maybe it was the isolation of the ship, or maybe it was just her mind playing tricks on her. She glanced at the man lying motionless in the bed, his chest rising and falling steadily. But something felt off. As she reached out to place the bowl on the nearby table, something moved. It was a subtle shift, barely noticeable. Ilara froze, her eyes darting back to the bed. For a moment she thought she had imagined it. The room was still. The air was thick with silence. But then she saw it again. Something under the blanket. Something small, but unmistakable, shifting ever so slightly. It wasn't the man. He hadn't moved at all, and yet something beneath the fabric seemed alive. Her breath caught in her throat. The unease in her chest tightened. Ilara leaned forward, her body rigid, her eyes locked on the spot under the blanket. What was it? What was moving? Was it part of his injury? No. That didn't make sense. She had tended to every wound, every scratch. Nothing should have been moving. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. Could it be some sort of alien parasite? No, that didn't seem likely. They had been on this mission for months, far away from any planet with the potential for alien life. Or had they? She shook the thought away. She couldn't afford to jump to conclusions. There had to be a logical explanation. But as she watched, the movement under the blanket became more pronounced, almost rhythmic, as if something was trying to escape. The blanket shifted just slightly, as though it were struggling to hold whatever was underneath it. Ilara's pulse quickened. Her eyes flickered between the man on the bed and the blanket. Should she call for help? No. The ship had been out of communication range for days. It was just her, the man, and whatever was hiding beneath the blanket. She took a cautious step forward, reaching out with one hand. Her fingers grazed the edge of the blanket. She could feel the warmth emanating from whatever lay hidden underneath. But it wasn't the warmth of a human body. It felt different, foreign. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears as she slowly pulled back the blanket. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to stop, to turn away, to leave the room. But she couldn't. Something, a deep, primal instinct, pushed her to continue. What was this thing? What was it? The moment the blanket lifted, her breath caught. Her eyes widened in shock and her hand froze in midair. Beneath the fabric there was no injury, no wound, no scar. Instead, what lay before her was something far more disturbing. A strange, translucent object, small but pulsating gently as if it were alive. It had tendrils, delicate and thin, that seemed to twitch with every beat. The object itself was glowing faintly, its surface shimmering in the dim light of the room. Ilara stepped back, her mind scrambling for an explanation. She knew nothing about alien technology or biology. She was just a medic, trained to care for the injured, to treat wounds and help people heal. But this was something entirely different. As she stood there, frozen in place, she noticed something else. The object under the blanket wasn't just reacting to her presence, it was somehow communicating with the man on the bed. His chest rose and fell more rapidly now. His breath was shallow, his body beginning to tense. Was he aware of the object? Did he know what it was? She wanted to scream, to run, to lock herself in the cockpit and never come back to this room. But something told her that this moment was more important than her fear. This was not just an injury. This was not just an accident. This was something far bigger than anything she could have imagined. Ilara reached out once more, her hands trembling as she touched the pulsating object. It felt warm, but it also felt alive. She wasn't sure how to describe it, but there was something almost sentient about it, as if it recognized her touch. What had she uncovered? And why did it feel like the beginning of something far more dangerous than anything she had ever experienced before? The man's eyes fluttered open, and Ilara knew deep down that everything was about to change. Ilara stood there, frozen in disbelief, her hand still hovering above the strange, pulsating object beneath the blanket. The room felt colder now, the air thick with an unnatural stillness that made every breath feel like a struggle. She had always been taught to remain calm in difficult situations, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Her training had prepared her for injuries, for medical emergencies, but not for whatever this was. The object under the blanket throbbed, its tendrils curling and twisting as if reaching out toward her. For a brief moment, she wondered if it could sense her fear. It almost felt like it was alive, like it was aware of her presence, studying her with an intelligence that sent a chill down her spine. She pulled her hand back slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The man on the bed stirred, his breathing becoming more labored. His eyes fluttered open, but they didn't seem to focus on anything, as if he were struggling to regain control over his own body. His lips parted as if he were trying to say something, but no sound came out. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. He was awake, but something was different about him. His skin, which had once been pale and lifeless, now seemed to shimmer with an odd, almost metallic sheen. It was as if the strange object had somehow changed him, altered him in ways she couldn't comprehend. Ilara. The whisper barely escaped his lips, hoarse and strained. His voice was so quiet, so faint, that for a moment she wasn't sure if she had heard him at all. "What is this?" Ilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though she wasn't sure if she was asking him or the object itself. "What's under the blanket? What are you hiding?" The man's eyes focused just barely, and his gaze locked onto hers. There was a look in his eyes now, a look that she hadn't seen before. It wasn't the look of a man in pain or confusion, but one of understanding. His lips parted again, and this time his voice was louder, though still strained. "It's part of me," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. "But it's not what it seems." Ilara's mind raced. Part of him? What did that mean? How could an object like this be connected to him? She turned her gaze back to the object, the strange glowing tendrils still twisting beneath the blanket. The more she stared at it, the more she felt an inexplicable pull toward it. There was something almost magnetic about it, something that made her want to reach out and understand it, even if every instinct in her body screamed to run far away from it. The man's voice broke through her thoughts again, softer this time, filled with a kind of sorrow she hadn't expected. "You need to understand," he whispered, his eyes locked on the object. "It's not something you can control. It has a will of its own, and it's been waiting for this moment." Ilara's heart raced. What moment? What did he mean? She tried to process his words, but the tension in the room was suffocating. She could feel her mind spiraling into uncertainty, the weight of the unknown pressing in on her. She looked at the man, but the confusion in his eyes only deepened the mystery. He wasn't fully himself, she realized. The object under the blanket, whatever it was, had a hold on him. Ilara. The man's voice grew stronger now, though still shaky. It's connected to something much bigger, something that's been waiting for centuries. Her pulse quickened. Something bigger? What did that mean? Was he talking about an alien force? Was this object some kind of extraterrestrial artifact? She glanced back at it, its tendrils still writhing, its faint glow pulsing in rhythm with the man's breathing. Tell me what it is, Ilara demanded, her voice firm now. She couldn't just stand there, she needed answers. Tell me what's happening. The man swallowed hard, his face contorting with pain, as the glow from the object seemed to intensify. It's not just an object, he rasped. It's an intelligence, a consciousness. It's been dormant, but now it's waking up, and I'm the one it chose. Ilara took a step back, her mind reeling. A conscious object? An alien intelligence? She could feel her heart racing in her chest. This was far beyond her understanding. Everything she thought she knew about space, about life, was being turned upside down. What do you mean, chosen? Ilara asked, her voice trembling, with a mix of fear and curiosity. What is it choosing you for? The man's face twisted in anguish, and for a brief moment Ilara saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Desperation. It's using me, he whispered, almost too quietly for her to hear. I was meant to carry it. I was meant to be its vessel, to bring it to life. But it's too much for me. It's taking over. Ilara's eyes widened. Was he saying that the object had some kind of control over him? That it was using his body? She stepped closer again, her instincts screaming at her to help him, to save him from whatever this was. But how could she help him if she didn't even understand what was happening? I don't know how long I can fight it, the man continued, his voice shaking with fear. It's too powerful. It's not just an alien artifact, it's a weapon that could destroy everything. Ilara's mind went blank. A weapon? How could something like this, so small and so strange, be a weapon? What kind of power could it have, and why had it chosen him? The man's body jerked suddenly as if something inside him had shifted, and the object under the blanket pulsed again, stronger this time. The room filled with a strange hum, like a low vibrating sound, and Ilara could feel it in her bones. The object was awakening, and with it, the fate of everything was about to change. Ilara's heart raced. She had to act, but what could she do? She didn't have the knowledge, the resources, or the answers. All she had was fear, and the man before her who was now more stranger than friend. The mystery deepened with every passing second, and as she stared at the glowing object, she realized she was standing at the edge of something far greater than she could comprehend. The discovery had only just begun. Ilara's hands trembled as she stood over the bed, watching in disbelief as the man's body twitched violently. His once calm demeanor had transformed into a raw display of tension and pain. The object beneath the blanket pulsed erratically, its glow intensifying with every passing second, as if feeding off the man's suffering. Ilara knew she had to act quickly. The longer she waited, the harder it would be to control whatever this alien force was. The man's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer the familiar eyes she had come to know. They were wild, filled with a haunting intensity, as though his mind had been overtaken by the very thing he had warned her about. He gasped for air, his body convulsing as if the object under the blanket was trying to force its way out. Ilara. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. You need to get away. It's too powerful. His words were interrupted by a guttural scream, one that made Ilara's blood run cold. She stepped back, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never seen him like this, his body writhing as if something was trying to break free from within him. The object beneath the blanket seemed to pulse faster now, almost as if it had a life of its own. Ilara knew she had to do something, but what? Her medical training hadn't prepared her for this. She wasn't a scientist or an alien expert. She was just a medic, a healer, trained to save lives. But this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The man's body arched violently as another scream tore from his lips. His fingers clawed at the blanket, desperately trying to pull it off, but the object seemed to be holding him in place. It was as if it was tethered to him, controlling him, bending his will to its own. Ilara's instincts screamed at her to run, to get out of this room before whatever was happening consumed them both. But she couldn't leave him. She couldn't abandon him to whatever dark force had taken over his body. Ilara! The man's voice cracked, his eyes wide with terror. Help me! You're the only one who can stop it. A surge of determination washed over her. She didn't know how, but she had to help him. She couldn't let him suffer like this, trapped in a battle between his own mind and whatever alien entity had taken control. She couldn't let him become a vessel for something that could destroy them all. Taking a deep breath, Ilara approached the bed slowly, her eyes never leaving the writhing figure before her. The man's chest was rising and falling rapidly, each breath a painful struggle. The object under the blanket had grown larger, its tendrils now visibly wriggling, seeking release. Ilara reached out, her fingers brushing against the edge of the blanket. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty, but then, with a final surge of courage, she pulled the blanket back. What she saw sent a jolt of shock through her entire body. The object had transformed. It was no longer the small pulsating mass she had first seen. It had grown, stretching and twisting, its tendrils now spiraling outward like a living creature trying to escape from its prison. It was a mass of dark, glowing organic material, its surface undulating as if it were breathing, alive. The object seemed to respond to Ilara's touch, pulsing more violently as if it were trying to communicate with her, to control her, just as it had done with the man. The man's body spasmed again, his eyes rolling back in his head. "You have to stop it," he screamed, his voice raw with pain. "It's taking over." Ilara's mind raced. She had no idea what she was dealing with, but she knew one thing for sure. This object wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. It was alive, and it was feeding on the man's body and mind. The more she looked at it, the more she realized that the object wasn't just controlling him. It was trying to use him as a host, a conduit for its own power. But Ilara wasn't about to let that happen. She couldn't let this thing win. She stepped back, her mind whirling as she tried to think of a solution. There had to be something she could do. The ship's medical supplies weren't equipped for something like this. But she had to try. There was no time to waste. "Ilara?" The man's voice broke through her thoughts. He was struggling to sit up now, his body trembling violently, as if he were in a tug of war between his will and the alien entity's power. "You have to take control. You're the only one who can stop it. If you don't, we'll both be lost." The words hit Ilara like a ton of bricks. She didn't have the luxury of time. If she didn't act now, the man she had been trying to help would be completely consumed by this alien force. There was no more room for hesitation. With newfound resolve, Ilara moved quickly to the medical station. She grabbed a small, high-powered syringe, one that was used for extreme medical conditions like rapid sedatives or pain relief. She didn't know if it would work, but it was all she had. She loaded the syringe and rushed back to the bed. The man's body was twitching violently, his eyes flickering between moments of clarity and pure, uncontrollable fear. Ilara could see the terror in his eyes, the knowledge that he was losing control, but still he reached out for her. "Ilara." His voice was weaker now, a mere whisper. "Please." Without another word, Ilara pressed the syringe into his arm, injecting the sedative deep into his vein. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she had to try. The moment the sedative entered his bloodstream, his body went completely still. His eyes closed, his breath steadied, and for a brief moment, there was silence. But it wasn't over. The object beneath the blanket pulsed one last time, its glow brightening to an almost blinding intensity. Ilara recoiled, fear rising in her chest as she realized that the sedative hadn't stopped the entity. It was only temporary. She had bought them time, but the real fight had only just begun. The room was quiet now, save for the hum of the spaceship's engines in the distance. Alara took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she looked at the man, unconscious but still alive. She couldn't let go. She couldn't walk away. Not now. The battle for control had just begun, and she was ready to fight. The room was filled with an eerie stillness. Alara stood by the bed, staring at the man she had tried so hard to help. His body lay motionless, the sedative she had administered taking effect, but it was clear that the real battle was far from over. The strange object under the blanket pulsed with a quiet intensity, its glow dimming slightly but still undeniable, still somehow alive. She had given him the sedative in a last-ditch effort to control the alien force that had taken over his body. For a brief moment it seemed like it had worked. His breathing had slowed, his body was relaxed, and the violent tremors had stopped. But deep down, Alara knew that this wasn't a permanent solution. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't going to be so easily defeated. As she stood there, lost in thought, the man's eyes fluttered open again. This time they were different. The wild panic that had consumed him earlier was gone. There was a calmness in his gaze, but it was not a calmness that Alara recognized. It was as if something else had taken control. The object beneath the blanket began to pulse again, but this time, the rhythm was slower, more deliberate. It was almost as if it were syncing with the man's heartbeat. Alara. His voice was low, steady, but filled with an overwhelming sense of sadness. It's over. The battle. It's finished. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What's happening? She asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The man's lips trembled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of comfort. It was a sad, knowing smile. I've been fighting it for so long. It's too powerful, Alara. But now it has won. Ilara's eyes widened in shock. No, I won't let it control you. You're still in there. You can fight this. She reached out to him, her hands trembling as if trying to hold on to whatever remained of the person she knew. He shook his head weakly, his gaze drifting toward the object beneath the blanket. You don't understand, he whispered. It's not something I could control. It's ancient, Alara. It's been waiting for centuries, maybe longer. It's part of a bigger plan. I was just a vessel, a host, and now it's done. The room grew colder, and Alara felt a strange pressure in her chest. This wasn't just about saving him anymore. This was about something much bigger than the two of them. The object was more than just a weapon or a tool. It was a force, an ancient intelligence that had been dormant for ages, and it was now awake, fully aware of its purpose. The realization hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. Everything she had witnessed, the object, the man's transformation, the way it had controlled him, was all part of a larger plan. The man had been chosen not by accident, but by design. Why me? Alara asked, her voice trembling. Why him? Why now? The man's eyes locked with hers, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of understanding, a flicker of the person he once was. Because we're the ones who were meant to carry it, Alara. We were chosen to help it awaken. And now it has. A strange stillness filled the room as the object beneath the blanket stopped pulsing altogether. For a brief moment everything was quiet. Alara's mind raced. What was this plan? What had the man meant by helping it awaken? What was it going to do now that it was fully in control? As if reading her mind, the man's lips parted again, his voice softer this time. The truth is, Alara, it's not about power. It's not about control. It's about survival. The universe is in danger, and this entity is the only thing that can save it. Alara took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean? How can it save the universe? The man closed his eyes, his body twitching slightly as the alien force within him seemed to be struggling to maintain its hold. It's not just a weapon. It's a key to a power that could either save or destroy everything. It's an ancient force, older than any civilization we know, and it's been waiting for the right moment to awaken. Now, Now that moment is here. The weight of his words sank in. The object, this alien force, was part of something much larger than any of them had understood. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to something unimaginable, something that could change the fate of the entire universe. And Alara, by being here, by being the one to care for him, had unknowingly become a part of this plan. The man's eyes opened again, this time with a deep resolve. You were always meant to be a part of this, Alara. You've been chosen too. This ship, this journey, it was all to bring us to this point. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. No, I'm just a medic. I'm not part of this. I don't have any power over this. The man smiled faintly. You don't have to understand it yet, but you will. We're both in this together now, and together we can decide how it ends. Before she could respond, the object beneath the blanket pulsed once more, this time with a quiet finality. The room filled with a soft hum, and Alara could feel the presence of the entity in the air around her. She didn't know how, but she felt it. This alien intelligence had fully awakened. It was no longer dormant. It was here. And now it was up to them to choose how to proceed. With the weight of this realization heavy on her chest, Alara turned to the man. No longer just a soldier, but someone whose fate was tied to something far beyond them both. You're not alone, she whispered, her voice filled with determination. We'll face this together. The man nodded, his face filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. And as the ship continued its silent voyage through the stars, Alara knew that their journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The universe awaited. And with it, the unknown future they would have to face together.